The Banqiao Dam, located in China's Henan province, was part of an ambitious effort to control flooding in the Huai River basin. Built in the 1950s, the dam was designed with the best available technology at the time, intended to prevent the devastating seasonal floods that had plagued the region for centuries. Spanning over 380 meters wide and standing more than 118 meters tall, Banqiao was a symbol of progress in modern engineering. Initially, the dam was seen as a success, holding back immense quantities of water during the rainy seasons and protecting the nearby towns and villages from the historical flooding that had claimed so many lives in the past. However, behind its impressive structure lay vulnerabilities that would later be exposed in a catastrophe of unimaginable scale. The reliance on outdated engineering models and insufficient attention to safety measures left the dam in a precarious position, especially in the face of an extreme weather event. Adding to this was a growing political pressure during China's Great Leap Forward. Speed in construction was prioritized, and some design features, like its spillway capacity, were underdeveloped. Local populations were unaware of these limitations, continuing to build and thrive in the dam's protective shadow, unaware of the growing risk. But in 1975, nature would put the dam's limits to the ultimate test. In early August 1975, Typhoon Nina formed off the coast of Taiwan, initially expected to weaken before reaching mainland China. However, what followed was a dramatic intensification that no one could have predicted. By the time Typhoon Nina made landfall in the Henan province, it had transformed into a powerful and sustained weather event, bringing with it an unrelenting deluge of rain over several days. As the storm approached, meteorologists grew increasingly concerned about the potential strain on the country's dam infrastructure. The Banqiao Dam, in particular, was identified as being in a vulnerable position due to its reliance on spillways that had not been designed for such extreme levels of rainfall. Between August 5th and 7th, the region experienced unprecedented downpours, with over 1,600 millimeters of rain falling, equivalent to what the area would normally receive in an entire year. The torrential rains exceeded even the most conservative projections, triggering flash floods, landslides, and swelling rivers. Government officials and engineers tried to manage the rapidly rising water levels, but their efforts were hampered by miscommunication and outdated data. The evacuation of the surrounding areas was delayed as authorities hoped the dam would hold, relying on faulty assumptions about its design's resilience. As water continued to rise, the situation became critical. With the storm still raging, the dam's reservoirs were soon filled beyond capacity, and the spillways designed to release excess water were simply inadequate to cope with the overwhelming volume. Despite the increasing danger, local residents remained largely unaware of the looming disaster. On the night of August 8, 1975, after days of relentless rain, the Banqiao Dam reached its breaking point. Cracks started to appear along the structure as the dam could no longer hold back the overwhelming pressure of the floodwaters. In the early hours of August 8th, the dam finally gave way, releasing a staggering 700 million cubic meters of water in a matter of hours. The collapse unleashed an unstoppable tidal wave, estimated to be over 10 kilometers wide and traveling at a speed of nearly 50 kilometers per hour. The water ripped through the countryside, obliterating everything in its path. Entire villages were washed away in minutes as the floodwaters surged through the plains. Houses, roads, farms, and infrastructure were destroyed, leaving nothing but devastation behind. The sheer force of the water was unimaginable as it uprooted trees, overturned vehicles, and swept away bridges, cutting off escape routes and isolating entire communities. The destruction was exacerbated by the collapse of several other smaller dams downstream, creating a domino effect that magnified the impact of the flood. The people living in the floodplains had no time to react. Without adequate warning systems in place, most were asleep when the dam broke, unaware of the wall of water rushing toward them. In the space of a few hours, what had been a landscape of farmland and small villages was transformed into a vast, lifeless lake of mud and debris. Over 85,000 people are estimated to have drowned in the immediate aftermath of the dam's collapse. The collapse of the Banqiao Dam was only the beginning of the disaster. In the days and weeks that followed, the situation grew even worse as survivors faced a severe humanitarian crisis. With entire towns submerged and infrastructure wiped out, the region was plunged into chaos. Food and clean drinking water were in short supply, and the destruction of roads and bridges made it almost impossible for rescue teams to reach the hardest-hit areas. In addition to the flood-related deaths, an estimated 145,000 people died from the secondary effects of the disaster. disease outbreaks spread quickly in the aftermath, as the lack of clean water and proper sanitation contributed to the rapid spread of illness. Malnutrition became rampant, as crops were destroyed and livestock drowned in the floodwaters, cutting off food supplies for the surviving population. Many survivors were forced to live in makeshift shelters with little to no medical assistance, as hospitals and clinics had been swept away or severely damaged. The Chinese government, already dealing with political challenges and economic strains, struggled to mount an effective response. Relief efforts were slow to mobilize, and with communications down in much of the region, it took days before the full extent of the disaster was even understood by the outside world. As rescue teams finally reached the isolated areas, the scale of the damage became painfully clear. Millions of people were displaced and entire communities had been wiped off the map. The survivors faced not only the loss of their homes, but also the devastating emotional toll of losing family members, neighbors, and entire livelihoods in a matter of hours. The Banqiao Dam disaster remains one of the deadliest dam failures in history, with a death toll estimated to exceed 230,000 people. Beyond the immediate loss of life, the disaster had a profound impact on China's approach to engineering, disaster preparedness, and emergency response. It exposed the risks of underestimating the power of natural disasters, as well as the consequences of prioritizing speed and political goals over safety in construction projects. In the aftermath of the catastrophe, China implemented major reforms in its dam building policies. Stricter safety regulations were introduced, and many of the country's older dams were retrofitted or rebuilt to withstand extreme weather events. The government also invested in improved early warning systems and flood control measures to prevent such a disaster from ever happening again. Additionally, there was a growing acknowledgement of the importance of transparency and accurate communication between authorities and the public, as the delay in evacuating affected areas had been a major factor in the high death toll. Despite these changes, the Banqiao Dam disaster remains a somber reminder of the devastating consequences when infrastructure fails. The survivors, many of whom lost everything in the floods, continue to live with the memory of that tragic night, and the region itself has never fully recovered from the damage. Today, the story of Banqiao serves as a cautionary tale for countries around the world, highlighting the need for rigorous safety standards, proper maintenance, and proactive disaster management to protect against the unpredictable forces of nature.